Welcome to the Springs Are Everywhere podcast, a production of SMI, the Spring Manufacturers Institute. I'm your host, Gary McCoy, Executive Director of SMI. In this edition, we'll talk with transportation markets expert Derek Kaufman of Schwartz Advisors. He'll tell us about the state of the automotive market, especially the impact of hybrids and electric vehicles on the spring industry. In our second segment, we'll chat with chef turned leadership psychologist and executive coach Edgar Papke. He's dedicated to studying and teaching the human art of business, and he helps organizations to get aligned around the same goals. The Springs Are Everywhere podcast is brought to you in part by our platinum sponsor, Gibbs Interwire. It's my pleasure to welcome Derek Kaufman to the Springs Are Everywhere podcast. Derek is someone I have known for many years through my career in the automotive aftermarket. Derek is based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's been a managing partner for Schwartz Advisors since 2014. It's a company that specializes in mergers and acquisition support and organizational consulting for the auto aftermarket. Derek, it's great to see you again, and thanks for joining me today.
Gary, great to be with you.
So, Derek, spring manufacturers are looking at electric vehicles as a potential new market for their products, and some are already in that industry. Now, some experts over the last couple of years believe the electric vehicle market has stalled. Do you agree with that assessment?
You know, the one thing, Gary, about I'll call it battery electric vehicle, BEV, as opposed to hybrids, right? You can't read the headlines and understand what's going on in this market. You got to read the balance of the article, and it has stalled. And the reason it stalled in 2023 was, and I'll give you one key instance, and I will call it the Chicago winter of 2023. A thermal management system on a battery electric vehicle needs to run 24/7 to keep the batteries at an optimal temperature for the life, of the battery, trying to maintain a long life. So if it gets to -5 in Chicago, the battery system is just working overtime, with heaters to heat the battery. So I have a friend with a Ford 150 Lightning, and they parked their truck overnight in Iowa, and it's like 10 degrees outside, and it had 300 miles of range. They get up in the morning, and the truck has 200 miles of range, and it hasn't moved a foot. And the reason is that the thermal management system is using battery current to heat the batteries. So what we saw in Chicago was a whole bunch of Teslas basically abandoned at charging centers because it got so cold and the batteries got so low that they wouldn't accept the supercharge. You couldn't charge the car, so you had to flatbed them, back home. So that I believe that event was a real wake-up call for people in the market for battery electric vehicles, and they said, there is some work to be done here, and we're at the early stage of the technology, and we need to have this technology and the charging network, mature before this becomes mainstream. So we have the early adopters ramp this thing up in a crazy manner. Then all of a sudden reality sets in and the curve begins to flatten out a little bit.
So you're saying the infrastructure really has to come up to a level that brings comfort to users.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are two factors here. The number of chargers is one factor. As people who live in apartments, for instance, begin to enter the BEV movement, they don't have a place to charge their car. So the apartment has to install it, or they have to have publicly available chargers. Right now, about 80% of the charging of electric cars is done by people with a lot of money who bought the cars early. They charge them at home. But as we come up the curve, you're going to get more and more people requiring public charging. So the number of chargers, number one. But number two is charge time. So right now we're talking, hours, and in some cars, maybe 30 minutes to get to 80% charge, something like that. If we can get that down under 10 minutes, then the number of installed chargers obviously, become more available because cars are spending less time at them. So the U.S. Congress has allotted $7.5 billion to increase the number of chargers in the country. They did that about 2 years ago. And my last count of the number of chargers that have been installed by the federal government is exactly 7. So we're not doing a good job at bringing the
Sure.
number of chargers up, to what we need.
Derek, the Toyota chairman recently predicted that the vast majority of vehicles sold in the coming decades will not be fully electric. Do you agree with that assessment?
I I absolutely do. Schwartz Advisors maintains a forecast. So we forecast by year between now and we take it all the way out to 2050 because we this is a long game that we're playing. And even with the California mandates, even with the federal mandates of saying we need to be 50% of sales, by 2030 or whatever it is, we still show 50% of the VIO, the vehicles in operation in the country, being ICE or internal combustion engine cars, even in 2050. And the reason is what basically Toyota brought up is that there are many internal combustion engine powertrains that can provide a low carbon or a near zero emission solution in the future. And hybrids, bringing a small battery and a really fuel efficient and low emission engine together can be a great example. Some of the mild hybrids that are 48-volt cars, can be very clean and provide a great mix. So the irony of it is that the new ICE alternatives that Toyota is talking about here, and that's anything from e-fuels to hydrogen infusion, these types of things. They all depend on tons of electricity to make them or to run the refineries, for these new fuels. So it's going to be very interesting to see. But I do agree there. You'll note that Toyota is kind of relented and said they're bringing in full battery electric vehicles, but I think their hybrid is basically correct the way they're thinking.
So, do you think potential vehicle buyers are more willing to pay for hybrids and plug-in hybrids as a bridge to an all-electric future?
It, it's interesting. So our forecast shows hybrids coming up and then peaking, and plug-in hybrids never making 2%
Mm,
of the vehicles in operation because of their expense. We think as full battery electric vehicles get better, more range, shorter charging times, that the needs for hybrids and plug-in hybrids will go down. However, it's a matter of geography in the United States. So we always tout Norway as, a country. Now it's gone 100% battery electric, and that's absolutely great for Norway. But Norway is the size of New Mexico, right?
right.
That's a pretty close geography size to Norway. They're not dealing with the geographies of the United States. They're not dealing with the commutes that we do in the United States. So a lot of people are commuting more than 30 miles one way, to go to work. So hybrids, I think, will always be a factor, going forward. I think people are certainly showing that they're willing to buy them now. They're also buying plug-in hybrids, but I believe that plug-in hybrids will effectively be too expensive in the long run for people. They won't make the Moore's curve of the early majority and the late majority. I think they'll be replaced by battery electric vehicles, and then just straight hybrids and mild hybrids going forward.
Yeah, and kind of as a follow-up to that, Derek, getting consumers to embrace any new technology has always been a challenge. And when it comes to the EV market, where do you see consumers in the technology adoption life cycle?
I It's a good question. I love the study of the psychology of why people buy stuff. And I am a very strong, I mentioned Moore's curve here a minute ago. I'm a very strong proponent of what Jeffrey Moore did in the book Crossing the Chasm. If you haven't read that book, everybody should read that book who's in the sales game. So it's a bell-shaped curve, and it shows how people adopt new technology. And over on the left side of the curve, they are showing the innovators, right? The people who want to save the world with their electric car are buying Teslas at $120,000 a piece. And then the curve begins to come up. And beyond the innovators, you get to the early adopters. They bought in too, but they're not quite, as avid, as the early adopters. But they do move the curve up. And then as the curve begins to reach its apex, you get into the early majority, and as it peaks and begins to come back down, you get into the late majority. These people are buying the technology. They eventually like the technology. They are maybe pulled into it by the momentum of the innovators and things, but they're more economically driven. So the price of the car needs to make sense, and that's why you see all these EV brands trying to get their cars under $40,000 into the $30,000 range. As you come down the late majority, then these are the people that are waiting for the market to shift and basically to standardize itself with battery electric vehicles. This is the way we're going to go, so I have to go that way too. And finally, at the very far end, the right of the curve, you have the laggards, the people who are just never going to buy a battery electric vehicle. And in fact, I think they're going to increase in our market. And we're going to see the average age of a car, which is 12 and a half years right now, go up to 13 and a half, 14 years as people hold on to their ICE cars going forward. So I really believe that Moore's curve explains how this thing will run.
Derek, a final question for you. Do you believe a transition to hybrids or VEVs will result in greater or reduced sales for spring makers? And if you could look in your crystal ball, how should they plan to be part of this market as suppliers?
On balance, Gary, I would say this. Number one, the battery electric vehicle market is good for anyone supplying components for undercar applications. The cars are way heavier than ICE cars. Batteries are really heavy. And batteries, even as they go solid state and things, batteries are going to continue to be heavy. So they punish suspensions more because of the weight of the car. The center of gravities are lower than ICE cars, but they still punish steering geometries, springs, shocks, all of that. Number two, they have way higher torque at 0 RPM, basically. So they come off the line like gangbusters. I always tell the story. I think that Jay Leno had a 2015 Tesla Model S. And he sold the car was 3 years old. I think he sold it in 2018 or something like that. He'd been through 3 sets of tires in 3 years. And the reason is the car has so much torque that you're up to 60 miles an hour in under 3 seconds or something, and you're just punishing the tires and all the spring related loads on the car. So I think that is good for undercar suppliers. The one thing that I think players in the spring market need to look at is the increased use of air suspensions on BEVs. I see a lot of the market moving that way. They're adjustable. And I think that if you're going to move to where the puck is going, not on all the cars, but on a lot of the cars, you're going to see air suspensions come in.
Derek, a lot of great information. And as always, you spoke at a conference I used to run, and you always had great insights and hasn't changed. So thanks for joining me today.
Great to be with you guys. Great to see you again. I hope we stay in touch.
As a longtime supporter of SMI's mission to inform the spring industry, Gibbs Interwire is proud to be the platinum sponsor of the new Springs Are Everywhere podcast. For over 6 decades, Gibbs Interwire has provided high-quality spring wire and strip products in carbon, nickel, red metals, and stainless steel alloys, along with specialty items such as shaped wire, strand, cable, brush, and staple wire. With many locations throughout North America, our experienced team is available where and when you need us. Gibbs Interwire offers exceptional value to our customers by providing a vast inventory from the best suppliers worldwide. Gibbs Interwire is a partner of Alloy Specialty Metals and a combined metals company. For your quote today, call Gibbs Interwire at 800-800-4422 or visit us at gibbswire.com.
I want to welcome Edgar Papke to the Springs Are Everywhere podcast. Edgar is an author, speaker, and globally recognized expert in business alignment, leadership, and organizational culture. He's the author of True Alignment, linking company culture to customer needs for extraordinary results, and some may remember him for being a guest at the SMI annual meeting back in 2015 in Orlando. Edgar, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on there with you. It's a pleasure.
So, Edgar, I'm going to ask you straight up, define what it means to be aligned.
Yeah, I'll give you the universal philosophical approach first, and then bring it down into business. When you look at the history of humankind, the quest that we're all on is to find alignment at different levels. And what I mean by that is the ultimate alignment that we deal with is the alignment to ourselves, our values, our beliefs, our desired legacies, who we want to be. Then there's alignment in our interpersonal relationships. So there's a relationship to self, and then interpersonally, alignment in our relationships to friends, families, spouses, which really are about alignment of expectations that we have for one another and how we treat one another and who we are. And then we expand that into groups and teams and communities, and eventually into organizations and the greater social context. And so when we speak the idea of alignment, it means that we have a common understanding of expectation, that we have a common idea of what it is that we're trying to seek. In business, it's alignment around 4 key pieces. And this is a systems way of looking at it, is that we want to get a clear alignment on what it is we're trying to achieve, the emotional driver behind it, which is why, because everything is human and everything is emotional in business. And then we have the how and the who. And most of the richness and alignment actually occurs in the how and the who. That's usually where we get stuck as well in terms of conflict and disagreement, etc. Yeah.
Edgar, what are the benefits of being aligned?
Now, the optimal one is achieving greater levels of success. That's typically what happens. When we're aligned to ourselves, we perform at higher levels. We have greater confidence, less fear about whether we're functioning well or not and performing well or not. So the benefits in teams are, of course, if everyone is rowing in the same direction and unison with one another and in alignment. It's about greater levels of performance. And by whatever definition of success you have for a business or a team, it's about that understanding of how powerful alignment is in getting the results that we're seeking.
So, Edgar, maybe talk a little bit about our members are always looking at the bottom line. So, what kind of benefit does alignment have towards that goal?
Well, so just look at the tension here, right? Is that when you have misalignment, you're going to see it. You're going to see it in different forms of conflict that show up. And so, what we like to say is that every conflict is an opportunity. Every misalignment shows up as some kind of conflict, which is an opportunity to improve and increase performance. So, when you think about bottom line, misalignments wind up unnecessary conflict, lack of collaboration, lack of cooperation, a lack of shared innovation. Um, of course, we have all the different forms of conflict that show up that take a lot of time and energy from people as opposed to actually doing their work. And just at a practical level, when we're clear about what our goals are, our performance expectations, our key performance indicators, when we're aligned to those and all working towards achieving those, they'll all end up eventually in the bottom line. All KPIs do. All of our business metrics in one shape, form, or another wind up influencing the bottom line. So the greater alignment, the less time and energy you're spending on the conflicts of misalignment and often the dysfunction that follows, and having a clarity of where we're all going together is what great business is all about.
So, Edgar, I know a lot of the companies that are members of our association in manufacturing in general, they're trying to solve the workforce problem. So, how does alignment help with both attracting employees, but also that key component of retaining employees?
Yeah. So when we break down alignment in a systemic way, we begin with the customer and what's the customer experience. And then ideally what we're doing is we're creating an environment for employees that aligns to that customer promise, that customer experience. So if we're caring towards the customer in some shape or form, then we ought to be caring for our employees. So one of the things we've been able to do through over the last 3 decades and looking what alignment in organizations and teams looks like is to be able to find the different indicators that allow us to see when the culture is in alignment to the customer experience. So the EX and CX come into alignment. We call that the total experience. And they kind of trust that you're treating me as an employee in a way that I'm actually supposed to treat my customer. And there's alignment to that. That helps us with engagement. And one of the biggest problems we have is, everything from quiet quitting, from what we experienced through the pandemic to great resignation, is really people seeking an alignment of who they are, their values to the organizations, and the organizations, how that translates into a customer experience, how the product and service is delivered into the marketplace. And that's really, really powerful. In fact, what we've been able to do is, leaders talk a great game. Let's get the right people on the bus. Most leaders don't describe their bus very well. They're not able to articulate their culture beyond just the words of value and belief. Their beliefs, they're unable to take it down to a level of clearly articulating how people individually and collectively are intended to create success. And having that form of predictability helps members in an organization not only have a clearly defined and well trusted culture, which is all part of your attraction of talent as well, and then to retain them and grow them and develop them in a well understood and well articulated culture, that's priceless.
You talked earlier about misalignment. So, what are some signs that your team is misaligned?
Yeah. So there's a Yeah, here we go. One is lack of clarity of role definition. So there's a misalignment that occurs, people not staying in their lanes or not collaborating with each other well enough. And what does that look like? There's not a clarity of problem solving. And so people go off in different directions to solve problems or to try and innovate and not be working together and informing each other in that way. Um, there's quite often we find a misalignment in terms of how conflict gets managed. We did a study as a result of the book that I wrote with Tom Lockwood, the book Innovation by Design. We did a study of 21 of the most innovative organizations in the world. And so we took that and then we built a survey around that after we published the book to test some of the theory and get some more feedback into our system of research. And we asked the question, what is the number one barrier to innovation in your organization? And it was really, really interesting. The top three answers: number one, a lack of problem solving skill and process. So you can see misalignment when people don't know what problem solving and what their roles within that construct are. The number two is a lack of conflict management skills, which speaks directly to misalignment, because the number one indicator we have that a misalignment exists is when there's a conflict among the people in the team and the team members about what, how, why things are supposed to happen and who's supposed to be doing them. And not surprisingly, the number three response we got was a lack of strategic alignment. So strategic misalignment. And it's really interesting because as we develop and we build our organizations and we scale them, one of the things that we're constantly struggling with is making sure that everyone understands how their work and what they're doing is in alignment to and contributes to the strategy of the team, to the strategy of the organization. So that simple idea in itself reminds us as leaders how important it is to always be communicating the strategy of the organization all the way to the customer experience, and then how each person is contributing to that. That sense of being, that sense of inclusion, that sense of contribution increases engagement, increases performance, and it's a wonderful way to overcome many of the misalignments that you'll see occurring.
So, Edgar, could you give me a back to basics rundown of how to get and also stay aligned?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The feedback we've gotten over the last couple of decades or so from our clients, the number one piece of feedback is that using the true alignment system and thinking about it systemically gives everyone a shared framework and a shared set of terminologies. So that's important. So the first step that we always take is to work with executive teams and leadership teams and management teams to teach them the system and the framework for alignment. Therefore, by doing that, what they get to do is be able to problem solve, identify the misalignments, be able to work through them and improve the alignment of the organization. It also turns out, and this is the second piece of feedback we get, it's very much a natural strategic planning process, because it begins with what is the purpose for our existence as a team organization? What are we trying to accomplish? And I know this is going to sound pretty elementary, yet when you think about basics and applying a framework to it, how valuable it is. So we begin with why are we in existence in the first place? What are our values? What are our beliefs about that? And then we work through that customer experience strategically, product and service development, market development, operations, the financial strategies, and eventually we get one of the keys to success, which is leadership development. How do we align leadership behavior? Because at the end of the day, when we talk the language of alignment, we need leaders to be role modeling the behavior, reinforcing the behavior, and by way of reputation, actually making sure that the culture is aligned and that everyone understands how it is that we're working together to attain success. So it's a very natural process, and you can just kind of look at it through that lens. And very often companies will say, well, is that customer experience really the front end that's so important? And the answer is yes. You can have a great product or service. If you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. So it comes back to that idea of how it is that we're delivering what we want to deliver that satisfies the customer in a way that gives us a competitive advantage.
So, Edgar, I'm going to ask you one final question, more practical. How do you set alignment goals with your team? And let's also talk personally.
That's an excellent question, because we work at that intersection of the personal and the professional. A lot of my work coaching CEOs and executives it gets very personal. Everything is personal. And I think the great fallacies of life: the sun rises, it doesn't, the earth turns. Don't take this personal, really. Come on. The with organizations, with teams, we have a very simple survey. that tracks, and you're able to understand where misalignments on your team are. Everything from vision to goal setting, through role definition, through problem solving, how do we collaborate, how we manage conflict, all of those different elements are measurable in terms of alignment. So we begin with that for teams and groups. And very often we do that again at the top of the organization, teach them the alignment system, and then we cascade it through the organization. At a personal level, well, it really is a matter of understanding your personality. Let me give you one idea. And because when it comes to alignment in your approach, it's much like if I give you a time management system that doesn't fit your personality or align to your personality, it's not really going to work. So understanding who you are, if you're a creative blue sky thinker or you're an analytical thinker, there are different ways to come at your own alignment. So it's very much personality preference in terms of how you go about doing it. But really, at the end of the day, it's looking at your life and at the different aspects of your life, perhaps your relationship to your partner, to your family members. It's about understanding your legacy and who you want to be, looking at your relationships, your interests, and actually deconstructing your life to see what it looks like now, and then to look at your life through the lens of what do I really want it to be? What do I aspire? Who do I aspire to be? And how do I get there? So when we deconstruct and we look at someone's life, we're able to then determine where are the alignments, misalignments in going forward, and what do I want that life to look like? And sometimes those choices and decisions aren't easy. They're just not, especially at a personal level. And so it's important to find one's own truth and to work towards that element of self-acceptance. At the end of the day, our lifelong journey for all of us as human beings is to come to a place where we're fully accepting of ourselves. Because that's when we're living without fear. That's when we have joy in our lives. And it's also when we perform at our best. So it's kind of peeling away the layers. Let's take a look at what's there and then saying, okay, where are the misalignments and how do I move to alignment in my life to be who I really want to be and what I seek for myself?
Edgar, this is great stuff, and I know we could probably go for hours, but how would folks get a hold of some?
As you can see, I get pretty excited about the subject that I study.
Yeah, it's great. It comes through. So, how would people get a hold of your materials and contact you if they have more interest in what alignment's all about?
Yeah, the easiest routes to take are one, of course, is the 3 books: True Alignment, The Elephant in the Boardroom, and Innovation by Design, and all the research and work that went into that. That's just great basic stuff, I think. It's served our clients well. And the other way is just to visit us on our website at truealignment.com. And please excuse us because we're constantly changing it. We're in a change right now again. And then the other way to do it is just email info@truealignment.com, or you can email me directly at edgar@truealignment.com. And as always, we'll respond as quickly as possible to all inquiries and all questions.
Well, Edgar, it was 9 years ago that you spoke to our groups. Good to see you again, and thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. As I said, it's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And yeah, anything we can do to be of help and service, just let us know. Don't hesitate.
In addition to Gibbs Interwire, the Springs Are Everywhere podcast has been made possible by the generous support of our silver sponsor, Automated Industrial Motion. You can learn more at aimcoil.com.
Thanks for joining us for the Springs Are Everywhere podcast. I want to thank our 2 guests today, Derek Kaufman and Edgar Papke. You can learn more about SMI at smihq.org, and be sure to subscribe, rate us, and like us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. I want to thank our platinum sponsor, Gibbs Interwire, and our silver sponsor, Automated Industrial Motion, for making this program possible.
If your weekly errands include laundry, you might be closer than you think to a spring. Some washing machines use extension springs in their suspension system to absorb vibrations and stabilize the drum during the wash cycle. Remember, springs are everywhere, and maybe even closer than you thought.